you very much, Lynn, for making the time to give us this hour, especially if you're at a matanga. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, if you could briefly introduce yourself and describe your career to include
Okay.
your decision to study abroad and where and how long you were a Kenyan diasporian. 3 minutes, please,
Okay.
Lynn.
So my name is Lynn Farah. Now Mrs. Odhiambo. I am 40 years old, but so Robert, I hear you. So yes, I've just turned 46.
Uh-huh.
I live in Mombasa. I've
Yeah.
been here for 10 years now.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, about 10 years. Yeah, 10 years. So I work for the county government of Mombasa. I started at the beginning of devolution, which was 2013. And I started in the Department of Education as a policy analyst. And then I moved to tourism and then moved to the governor's office. So I was in charge of his protocol. And then I moved to environment as the assistant director for administration. And then finally to the inspectorate now as the deputy director of administration. So I'm in charge of parking enforcement, and I'm also in charge of advertising compliance. So my background, okay, so I left Kenya in 1990. I was 15. It wasn't a choice that I had made. Um, I was, there's a time when you were, if you got into trouble in school, you were deported and sent to a school in Shags. So yeah, it was kind of like that for me. So my mom lived in the UK, so my parents just decided deport you to the UK. So I went to school in London. I did my GCSEs and my A levels and my university there. So I studied forensic science and criminology.
Uh-huh.
And then I came back to Kenya with the idea of being a pioneer forensic scientist. And the air was soon taken out of that balloon. I was too old to work in the police, and I was too old to I was too old to join the corps. So tried to set up my own thing, and that was a bit challenging. So ultimately, I just went into the security sector, and finally I joined the county. So yeah, I think that pretty much answers most of those questions.
Yeah. How
Um,
old were you when you came back?
I was there for 16 years, so I was about 31, 32.
Wow, and that's too old to join the police.
Yeah, the police, and I didn't have an ID. It was madness. So I didn't have an ID card, so I had to try and get that.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand that you have to bribe your way into getting an ID card, and especially with a surname like Farah, us border state people, you need to be vetted. So that created an issue in itself. So it took me quite a while. So I just opted not to do that. So my dad was like, you're going to get paid like 21,000 shillings. And I'm like, yes. So he was like, look, it's not pounds, that's Kenya shillings. How will you survive? But yeah, so it was an interesting time. But yeah, I'm firmly settled back in now.
Okay, well, you're very welcome, and we are glad that you stuck it out. We're also kind of glad you didn't go into the police. Robert Kamunyori, would you kindly introduce yourself briefly, describe your career to include your decision to study abroad and where and for how long you were a diasporian? You have 3 minutes.
Okay, so my name is Robert Kamnyori, and I run a company called Touch Inspiration, which is a software development company. I run some CTO positions. Right now, I'm CTO of Ongea, which is a online customer service portal. Decision to leave. Oh man, when we had finished high school, I did try to go to campus here. I got accepted into JKUAT, and but I couldn't. I just didn't understand what I was doing there because you're assigned what you're told to do back then, and I couldn't vibe with what I was told to do, which was biological sciences. Though, of course, you know, the dream was to eventually become a doctor and make my parents excited and happy. Now, after like 2 years, I'd like to say that I sat down with my dad, but it wasn't really a sit down. It was more like, yeah, either you apply for schools abroad or you get out of my house. And thank God I got those choices. Some people have got worse choices. So I applied for schools abroad and I got accepted, started off in Iowa, which that's when you realize when you land in the States, America is not all America. Like there's middle America and there's the rest of America. So I quickly transferred over to, but when I was in Iowa, which is cool, when I was in Iowa is when I was walking past this class and I saw computers and I got really excited. I walked into the class, I took the class, and that was the first class that I didn't have to study, and I got an A. And I was like, oh, okay, I can breeze my way through college. So that became my degree. So finished that. The decision, when I look at it now, subconsciously, my decision was never to stay in the States because my employers kept asking me to get my green card and I kept saying no. You know, I'll get back to you until it was the end. And I was like, oops, I gotta go. But yeah, so studied, and then I'd promised myself that I'd stay in the States until I felt that I could work from wherever. So one day I remember I was sitting in New York and I looked around and I was like, I think I'm done. And my H1 was coming to an end and I booked a ticket and I was home the next week. So now, what was the other question? Decision to study.
How old were you then?
When I came back, I was 36.
Okay.
35, 36. Actually, I came back on my 36th birthday.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. I think that's our that's that question. How long were you in the US for?
13 years.
13 years. Okay. All right then. Faith Muigai, would you kindly briefly introduce yourself and describe your career, including your decision to study abroad and where and for how long you were a diasporian? You're on mute.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Faith Muigai. I lived in the US for about 17 years, and I moved there at the age of 17 years, partially by choice because I was running to see my boyfriend at the time, who became my husband, and then also because my parents were a part of the airlift generation and also believed in exposure. So I was sent to Midland, Texas, which didn't really look like the United States, where I lived with my uncle briefly, then moved to Boston, thereafter moved to Baltimore, Maryland. My background is nursing, and I actually started progressing as a certified nursing assistant. So we started there, but then moved along the way, associate degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, and taking on roles across the board, working in institutions, Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland, and so on, and went into healthcare executive management, running hospitals, and so on. Primarily, I went to the US to be a doctor, of course, obviously. Things were thick, paying fees was hard. I then ventured into nursing to pay my way through school, which I did. And then ended up just loving the career and the profession and was very passionate about it. Through the 17 years being there, I raised 2 children. One is 18, one is 12, was married as well. So you are trying to do the balancing act of being a student, being a professional, and then being a mother, and so on and so forth. So trying to balance work life, which gave us a lot of pearls in terms of work ethic, responsibility, because you're taking care of your family as well as trying to be a career woman as well. Yeah, why did I move home? And I moved home at the age of 34 in 2012. I had family here, and 17 years coming and going was not very easy because of visa issues and so on. You know, you started out legal, then you become illegal, and then you become legal again. So you transition from having visa issues to having a green card and so on. But coming home was not that easy. It was also expensive. And then at the point of my career, I had peaked, you know, at director level and so on. I wanted a new challenge, and I came back in 2011, and I saw that the healthcare space here was wanting. And for me, I wanted to do something about it. So I moved back home, and I'm in the healthcare industry here now.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Faith. Maybe we could just move straight on to the next question with you. You said you moved back because of family and but that still doesn't explain why you didn't just stay until you retired.
I never wanted to
Why
stay.
did you decide to return home for a meaningful working life before retirement? And how did you decide where you make a difference?
So I intentionally had made a decision, or we had intentionally made a conscious decision that we were always going to come back home. But my thing is, being in a career path such as mine in terms of nursing, I knew that I had to elevate what I was doing, not only as a practitioner, but as an executive to be effective here. Right now, a nurse on the floor makes about 24,000 shillings a month. You know, a nurse in the US, that is otherwise, right? You can make an annual salary of about $120,000 a year, right? So I had to prepare myself strategically so that I could place myself in a position of a position that could make a difference here. So it was very intentional. I never planned to retirement there, but there was a lot of planning that went into that. In terms of, I actually said that I was not going to come home unless I was employed or unless I'd made adequate investments to be ready to come. And so it was a very conscious move. Family was key. My parents are now 87 and 82, but I wanted a new challenge in terms of how do I take the pearls that I'd learned in the US and actually transform them or translate them here in a place where healthcare is actually disenfranchised, it's neglected. And for me, was trying to make a difference that I could actually build and operate hospitals in this setting that had the same standards and quality that of in Johns Hopkins Hospital, University of Maryland. So that was the difference I was coming to make. And I actually built and operated hospitals. We were changing lives of women in an informal sector. We were offering them quality, dignity, respect. We had wonderful outcomes. It was exciting. So for me, it was the right move in terms of, I didn't come to work for Aga Khan. I didn't come to work for UNICEF. I did not come to work for UN. My clinics were Mashinani in Kahawa West and Ruiru. So when my father sees me coming, a master's prepared person going to give the ride, he's thinking that he did something wrong. And I actually was mad, you know, but it took that madness to actually transform healthcare. And that's why I'm sitting where I am, because we did it. I got validation, third-party validation that the quality of care I was giving was international. And once again, the hospitals are still existing and are serving women in the informal sector. And to me, that's where my passion lies.
Excellent. I can hear a real passion to make a difference in the healthcare field. Lynn, can we go to you? At what point did you decide that it would be, it would be too late for you to return home for a meaningful working life before your retirement, unless you moved quickly? And how did you decide where to make a difference? I think your interest is in law and order.
I think for me, because like I said, I went, you see, you find some people who go as adults, and for them, they want to build a life, abroad or whatever. For me, that was not it. I was sent there, pretty young. So I always wanted to come back. And I always felt that there was so much more I could offer here than there. I remember coming back and there was an article that I did about forensics, and you'd go somewhere and they're like, you're that forensics chick, and so it was really, that was what I wanted to do. I really wanted to make a difference, like Faith, in the healthcare system. I wanted us to look at crime scenes differently. I wanted us to be able to, I met so many people, like I met a young man who was in jail for, accused of raping a young girl who ended up having a baby. And when they did the DNA test, he was not the father of the child, but he was there on the strength of this girl's evidence. So I felt there was so much injustice, and that's what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, mine was more of a bigger hurdle because the police did not want to work with private forensic service providers. So that made it a lot harder. So that's why I went into the security sector. And when I was at KK, I set up, added forensics to the curriculum, and I taught them crime scene management, and they still do that training today. And it's the same thing now with the county. You still try and make sure that people get, some sort of justice, some sort of, and I've noticed that where I am right now, there's a lot of ladies that I feel I need to mentor. Yeah. So I find that although I came in with this kind of, I want to do security, but I'm finding that I'm being molded into another sort of role that I had not anticipated that I would be. So I don't know what was the other question you asked?
That you've answered it, you've covered it, that you were clear that you wanted to make a difference in crime scene management. Can we move on to Robert? Robert, you also decided to return home for a meaningful working life when you were 36. How did you decide where you make a difference?
I think mine was a bit more selfish. So I think when I was out there, I realized that I'd actually never be a millionaire in the States, and that did just not sit well with me. I could go from job to job, but I'd never be able to build an empire like I wanted to. I'd never be able to be a Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or whoever started Oracle or stuff like that. All that had been taken. And I felt like if I really wanted to make a difference and build an empire, it would have to be Kenya. So that was my goal.
I see. Well, that's very clear. We're 2 minutes behind, so let's move on. Robert, could we just continue with you? And when you were moving, how did you organize to pay for your first 6 months at home before you plugged into earning from Kenya? And what did you decide was the minimum amount of stuff you needed to carry home?
So I had a very what is the word? Transitory life in the States, where after I finished college, my plan was to spend in as much time in as many different states as I could. So I'd get a contract and I'd go, I'd get a contract here and I'd go, I'd get a contract here and I'd go. So I actually came back with just 2 bags, and that was it. As far as finances go, like I said, I decided to leave the States when I could work from anywhere. So when I moved back to Kenya, I actually had like about a year worth of contracts that I could fulfill. I could still be doing that now, which I am to some capacity. But at some point, like I said, when we go back to the empire dream, you have to start hiring locally and working locally. So that kind of tapered off, and also like you start going from small, where you're charging someone for your consultancy versus referring them to someone else. So I started losing those little pieces, but now I'm starting to actually pick up again with big organizations.
Cool, excellent. And what about you, Faith? How did you organize to pay for your first 6 months at home, and what did you pack to come home with?
Six suitcases and a 20-foot container. It could have been 40, but 17 years worth of stuff. Half the house was left. I packed half, the essentials being, the furniture, lazy boy furniture, which is so comfortable. The seats here are very uncomfortable. My bed and stuff like that. I didn't bother carrying appliances and stuff, transformer, all that nonsense. And when I came here, Nakumat, and now you have Carrefour, Quickmart, you can buy everything here. So essentially, I just needed my comfortable seats and my lovely bed and blah, 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 blah. My daughter's Lori, Ashley stuff. But other than that, everything is here. And of course, my clothes. What was the other question?
That was it. How did you pay for your first 6 months?
First 6 months, I actually gained employment or so I actually gained employment in the US, and I said I was not coming unless one of us had a stable job. Both of us could not come. So my husband was self-employed. I actually was hired in the US to lead an organization here in Kenya. So by first month, I had a paycheck. And yeah, so it was very soft, some savings, but it was a very soft landing. And one of the things is, what is the cost of living? I would ask friends, how much salary should, no one was telling me. But one of the things I said I would not compromise is the way I lived there. So my kids would still have to go to private school. I'd have to live in, Lavington, Valley Arcade, in the areas where I grew up. I was very, very bougie, but I was not going to compromise the way. But one of the things I say is that I see a lot of people coming in. If you're coming in, plan for about a year or two worth if you don't have employment. And when I say that, plan to have about $1,000 to $2,000 a month, because the cost of living here is expensive, depending on if you have a family or not, to be able to buffer you. When you are self-employed, areas such as IT, it's easy to pick up because you can innovate and you can plug in and so on. My husband was in the music industry, a sound engineer. There were already existing companies here. So us coming after not knowing anything in Kenya, and people have built their brands, and you're starting from scratch, it's challenging. And so, and you're in a very much compete environment. So for me, come with employment, or buffer yourself and be prepared financially.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's very, very useful to have an actual figure. What about you, Lynn? What was your conclusion at the age of 31? How did you pay for your first 6 months, and what did you carry home?
Okay, I also came with just suitcases of clothes, but for me it was savings. I luckily, and I think I was young enough. I was not married. I didn't have children, so it was easy just to go pitch tent at my father's house. And then after a while, he's like, "So, are you not going to move out or something? Like, hook me up, my guy." So. So I think to that extent, in that sense, it was really savings, but and clothes. So I think for most people, if you're planning to come back and you don't have, like Faith was lucky, you have a job, so you can kind of set yourself up. Kindly just save the money, plan, do your research. Don't come here thinking that you're going to come with something that guys have never seen before, because you'll be so surprised how much people actually, where Kenya is quite far ahead, in terms of that. So you're not coming with anything that's new. I was so shocked when I thought, where will I get my gel nails done? And shock on me when guys are doing, nails better than anybody. So yeah, so I think that's the most important thing.
Cool. Wow, you guys came really organized and prepared. Yeah, I found a job within 6 months, and thank goodness I did. I mean, I had 2 small children and hardly any savings. Right. Well, thank you so much, Robert, Faith, and Lynn. We are now going to move into the video of Dr. Ogutu answering these same 3 questions that you've just answered. Because it's a video, we're just going to give him a chunk of time to do it in. And meanwhile, while we listen to him, would anyone with questions please enter them in the chat? Can you see the chat along the bottom? There's a little icon down there for a chat. And if you type your questions in there, then we can ask them to our panelists after we finish listening to Dr. Ogutu. John?
I hope you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Hi and welcome, Dr. Vincent Ogutu. This is
the high school.
We'll give you about 2 minutes to do that. Welcome.
Thank you, Pauline, and great to be talking with Kenyans in diaspora and returnees as well, I guess. My name is Vincent Ogutu, and I'm the Vice Chancellor Designate of Strathmore University, meaning next year from May, I'll be taking over from Professor Odhiambo to run Strathmore University. I'm really in love with this career of teaching, and it started when I was a teacher at Strathmore School, which is the high school that Strathmore is named after. You know, Strathmore started as a high school in 1961. So this is what I do. I consider myself a treasure hunter, which is somebody who looks for powerful ideas that could change people's lives in radical ways. And then as a teacher, I share those ideas. So I spend half my time looking for brilliant, beautiful ideas, powerful ideas. And then I spend the other half of my time sharing it either with people I'm teaching in a class, in an executive training, or in a session like this one where I'm speaking at a conference or where I've been invited as a speaker. So that's what I do. I collect treasures and I share them. And one of the things that I've always been thinking about is this whole idea of why do we have so many Kenyans out there? You know, why aren't they back here helping us to build a country? And I've looked at this question from so many different ways. And so I'm glad that you guys are having this conference and that you're even trying to address this question. So I've addressed it myself, obviously. And then I know a lot of people who've addressed it and gotten different kinds of answers. So I could try and weave that into this discussion that we're having today. So back to you, Pauline.
Okay, thank you. And congratulations. And we're looking forward to, you having a successful, transition, and all the best. And as usual, we're always here to assist. Okay, so let's go with the first question. The first question is, describe your career to include the decisions to study abroad and where and how long you are diasporan.
Okay, a lot of it is random. So if you guys are looking for logic and reasons, I'm gonna be a big disappointment because a lot of my decisions are not the typical kinds of decisions. So my first opportunity to go abroad was when I was finishing high school, because my mother was working for American Life Insurance Company, which was under AIG, American International Group, and they had this scholarship for employees of AIG, where you could study in the States. And I was not doing badly in school, so I had a very good chance of getting this scholarship. So my mom told me to apply. But then I talked with my advisors back here at home, and they said, we need you here in Kenya, so don't go to the States, just stick around. We need all hands on deck. And so I disappointed my mom by saying, no, I actually don't want to go to the States at this point in life. Then she said, that's all right. The scholarship extends to a local scholarship as well. So I ended up getting an amazing scholarship from the Star Foundation, IIE. It was, handled by IIE. And so for the 3 years I was doing college in Kenya, it was fully paid for by the Americans with extra money for all kinds of stuff. It was a great treat. So I missed my chance to go. Then the second time that I went, that I did take, was when a Spanish professor here at Strathmore told me, have you ever heard of the Fulbright Scholarship? And I said, indeed, I have. Then he said, why don't you apply for it? I said, I don't stand a chance. He says, come on, I think you do, apply for it. Then I didn't. And then I took a holiday. I was in Mombasa, and he rings me up and says, the Fulbright scholarship application deadline is tomorrow. Did you apply? I said, no, I did not. He says, why the heck didn't you apply? Apply right now. I said, I'm in Mombasa. He said, make it happen. So fine. So I called my folks in Nairobi, please go to my drawer. You'll find my documents, scan them, do this. I wrote a letter of intent, blah, blah, blah. And long story short, I got the Fulbright scholarship. And so I ended up in the US. So I went to Rutgers University in New Jersey. And since I belong to this Catholic organization called Opus Dei, and hence my decision earlier on not to go to the States because they needed all members around to help with the work in Kenya, I said, okay, instead of renting a place in New Jersey, I decided to live in New York where there's a center of Opus Dei. So I was doing the opposite of what most Americans would do, so they would work in New York, live in New Jersey. I was living in New York and working and studying in New Jersey. So I would do the counter commute, perfect, because the train was always empty, whichever direction I went, because I was going the opposite direction to everybody. So I spent 6 years in New York, finished my PhD, and the deal with the Fulbright scholarship is you're supposed to go back home and serve for at least 2 years. And then after that, you can do whatever you want. So that's why I was saying you might not find my story typical, because it's not the typical story. Most Fulbrighters go back home, and some might come back to the States, but most will actually not, because they really love their country, they want to stay back there. Some might not leave the States, but that's either because they're breaking the rules or because it's a serious reason. So I met very many Fulbrighters from all over the world, and some were from countries that were at war, like Iraq. So they were given amnesty in the States, and so they just stayed on, and they're still there. So in my case, of course, I could come back anytime I want. There's always that choice, and I sunk a lot of roots in the States. I made a lot of friends, so I know the ins and outs, and I could very well settle there. But in my case, I've chosen to stay here. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's basically how long I stayed in the States and why I came back.
Okay. Do you mind sharing what you went to school for?
No problem. So I went to study. When I went, I thought I just wanted to understand leaders, because I've been fascinated by the fact that leaders are the ones who make decisions that could change Africa. My first 2 degrees, undergrad and master's, were in economics, because I thought economics is the way to go if we want to solve poverty. But when I realized it's the leaders who call the shots, it's not the economists, then I said, I still want to make a difference. And clearly, I'm not going to do that by being an economist. So I need to get into a position where I'm either a leader myself or I'm influencing leaders. And I was already in education, because I was sold on the idea that if you want to have an impact, you should actually influence people. So I was training future leaders for Africa, getting very talented kids who come to a school like Strathmore and try and inspire them to become future leaders themselves. And so I went to study how leaders do it. What is it that makes them capable of having people following them and dedicate their best energies to a cause? Like, what gives them such power? And there are many fields you can study it in, political science, etc. But I wanted to approach it from the psychological side. So I did organizational behavior, which is basically organizational psychology, anything psychological in the workplace. And I started looking at the buttons that leaders press. How do they motivate people? And then I got fascinated by the people. How do they get motivated? What buttons are pressed? And as I went deeper and deeper into motivation, I decided, let me go the whole hog. Like, what is the highest level of motivation? And that is meaning, when you find deep meaning in what you do. And even within meaning, the highest level of meaning you can reach is seeing your life as a calling. So if you see your life...
Okay, good. Congratulations. So it took you 6 years to do all 3?
No. 6 years to do the PhD alone.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't an easy question to answer because everyone was answering the question, how do you behave if you see your work as a calling, or if you see your work as a career, meaning you're climbing the ladder, the rat race, competing, or if you see your work just as a job, it's just something that gives me money. So everyone was studying how are you likely to behave if you fall into one of those three buckets. And then they'd always end the paper by saying, but wouldn't it be nice to know how you end up in those three buckets in the first place? Having either a job orientation to work or a career orientation or a calling orientation. Nobody was actually tackling that bigger, tougher question for the past 20 years. And I said, that's the question that fascinates me. I definitely want to find the answer to that question. And so that is what I did. I decided to study whether we are born that way, whether we are influenced to get into that. And once we've found a particular orientation, are we locked in? Can it change? Under what circumstances? So that's what my PhD was about. So as you can see, it's quite a vast question. And I decided to do it in using mixed methods. So I spent 1.5 years just doing qualitative research, interviews, coding, coming up with new theory, and then another 1.5 years testing the theory, using quantitative methods this time, so a different data set. So by the time I did these two huge studies and combined them to make a PhD, 6 years were gone. But I still think it was worth it. People think you can just go and get a PhD in 4 years in the US just because they do it in 3 years in Europe. But practically, it's not like that in the US. You know, typically people take 5 to 6 years. My classmates, nobody did it in 4. 2 did it in 5. 4 of us did it in 6. There's one who did it in 7, and there's one who's still doing it. So it's a long journey. And I have no regrets about the fact that it took so long because it opened me up in so many ways. I was challenged in so many ways that opened me up and made me the person I am today. So even though, yes, I was quite mature by the time I went to the States, I turned 40 when I arrived, but I still feel that experience in the US opened me up in ways that I hadn't been opened up before in Kenya, just because I was having an easy time in Kenya and not being challenged. You know, you're a big fish in a small pond. It's too easy. And then you go to a place like New York, New Jersey, and then I was meeting some of the brightest guys from all over the world. And then it basically challenges you in so many different ways. I didn't have any issues to do with race. Then I go to the US and you have to deal with something like that. And you become conscious of things you weren't conscious about before. And then you have to make decisions about your identity, which I didn't really have to make big ones before. And everyone there talks of finding yourself. It's not a question we ask in Kenya. You already know what you're supposed to do for the rest of your life. It's kind of like all programmed. But over there, it's so important to find yourself. And so I went through a finding myself experience as well. And through all these different hoops that I was jumping, I came to identify in stronger and stronger ways with the kind of person I wanted to become. And so just like in Kenya, they'll typically tell you, go find a job, do something sensible. Over there, if you say something crazy, people cheer you on. They're like, oh my gosh, you want to try and do that? Awesome. How are you going to do it? And then you have support groups to help you turn your crazy ideas into reality. So just living in a place like New York where everyone seems to be doing amazing stuff made me wonder, how come I'm not doing anything amazing? Until I started getting amazing ideas myself. And unlike in Kenya where they'd shoot them down, over there, people were like, do it, man, go for it. And so it really gave me wings. And I decided now that I can fly, where do I want to fly? And I said in Africa, because it's home. And of course, I could live in the US and make a great living for myself and enjoy myself and all of that. But I'd always feel I'm away from home. Whereas here in Kenya, you know, why would I leave Kenya? Because it's not the most comfortable place on earth. What I want to do is turn it into one of the most comfortable places on earth so that I don't have to think of living in other places. You know, I can actually enjoy being back here. And if you're middle class, you can pretty much get a lot done in Kenya. You can be pretty comfortable in Kenya. But for me, it's because I told you about the three kinds of orientation: job, career, and calling. I'm clearly a calling-oriented guy. So what makes me tick is having an impact, changing the world. And so where's the best playing field to do that? Like, I'm building my home into the best place possible on earth so that we don't have people dying on boats trying to go to work as a toilet cleaner in Europe as a better option to being back here in Africa. You know, how horrible. So we should work on making people feel at home, find opportunities here at home. And one of the beautiful things that I found when I came back, I was pleasantly surprised, was to see the same startup energy that I was seeing in New York and New Jersey. I was part of a group in New Jersey called Launch New Jersey, Launch NJ. And the idea was to build an ecosystem of entrepreneurs that would basically mimic the Silicon Valley dynamic and make entrepreneurs thrive in New Jersey. So I'd hang out with these entrepreneurs in New Jersey, in New York. So I'd really breathe that air of startup energy. And so when I came to Nairobi and found the same energy and so many accelerators and incubators, just like the ones I used to hang out in on the East Coast, I was like thrilled. This is it. So that's what got me to start talking to diasporans like yourselves, saying, guys, it's happening right here. You know, you don't have to be in Austin, Texas, in Boston, in Utah, or the Silicon Valley, where all these hubs are of entrepreneurship. That's happening right here in Nairobi. I'm constantly getting called to meet techies, to meet startups, and I'm meeting all kinds of guys, people my age who are bringing their experience from the diaspora to start something here, and also just young guys. I have some of the most awesome discussions with my own students who have crazy ideas, and they know I'm a little crazy myself, but there's this professor who's crazy and will listen to us and will encourage us instead of saying, just get a job, just focus on your career, finish that degree. And they find it kind of refreshing to talk to a guy who says, do it, man. Then they'll say, but I'll end up missing 2 or 3 classes if I go for that hackathon. I'm like, it's totally worth it. Do it. You'll catch up. You're bright. You know, you've got to experiment. You've got to try this stuff out. And so that energy is here. And I think if you guys have the know-how to start something back home, this is probably the time. Because if you come in later on when people have already done it, then you'll be coming to ask for a job, basically. But with the kind of knowledge you have over there, if you bring it here and you're courageous and you start something, then you're just when things are beginning. You have a head start because you have so much experience and especially self-confidence, which is what I think
Can we leave
here are lacking.
this video for later?
No one's given them permission to do quick.
Thank you. Well, that was a very inspiring talk. Particularly the bit about how it's extraordinary ideas get a much better reception in New York than they do in Nairobi. Robert, that's clearly a guy after your own heart. He doesn't want to be told to go get a job. He thinks you should do the adventurous thing. Well, now we arrive at the audience participation section. We have 2 questions from the audience. One is about culture shock. How did you deal with the social transition, like forming new relationships back home? What made it easy or hard? Who would like to take that?
I'm looking at me. I don't know what she's looking at.
I'll answer.
Yeah.
I think for myself, it was I kind of left having been away for in the middle of high school or whatever. It was I felt that I needed to pick up because I didn't have any adult friends in Kenya. It was just the friends that I had in school. So it was very easy to sort of rekindle those friendships. And I think even while we were abroad, we kept in touch, and so it was very easy to rekindle those friendships. And I think from then you start to establish friends. But you know, when you go away for a while, you come back and you've kind of changed. So you notice the difference with the friends who haven't left. They kind of look at you like you have a whole different experience from them. You sound different. You don't sound the way you used to. You know, you have experienced a whole other life over there. So coming back, it was very, you want to pick up exactly where you've left off, but some people have changed. So I think it's one of those things that you don't come back with sort of rose-tinted glasses and think that with some people, yes, you will pick up exactly where you've left off, but with others, it won't be. And then you'll find those people who you weren't particularly close to in school, you'll find that you really have a lot in common with them. I found that I made very good friends with people who are either several years ahead of me in school or several years below me in school, because you just found that you had some common ground. But yeah, it was very difficult just trying to, things in Kenya take a while to happen. People expect bribes, things are not as efficient. So those were the things that I really struggled with. I'm just like, why can't we just do it like this? Why does it have to take so long? Something as simple as my ID card took me like almost 2 years to get, So, by the way, that is a very important document. If you're coming back, please make sure you have it or start your processes now, because literally nothing can happen without it. So yeah, it was difficult, but it was doable. You will pick up and you will find that those things remain. But you'll find that you will go to shags and guys expect that, you have a money tree somewhere and everything that you have should be theirs. I remember going to shags and someone telling me they need my shoes because I've had an operation. I was like, so am I going to go back home barefoot? So there are things like that that you need to kind of come to terms with. Guys think that you have everything at your fingertips when you've lived abroad.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lynn. Well, it would seem, who was that question from? Caroline Lumosi. Lynn's answer is hang on to your school networks.
No, actually, I disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think you should not be afraid to walk away because you've changed. I think you should be fine with who you are now, and you've gone through all these experiences, and you don't owe your old friends anything. You don't need to hang out with them. You can find your new tribe, you can find your new people, and you can start again. And those people will elevate you further. I see a lot of people getting stuck in their old friends. Oh, my boys, these are my boys. And 6-7 years later, they haven't done anything else apart from move back to Kenya. We need to, don't be afraid of the way you've changed. Don't let people shame you. Don't, just be you, do your best, and literally just be unapologetic about who you are.
I'm just going to add on to what Robert is saying, because I agree with both Lynn and Robert, and then I bring another angle because I came in as a social entrepreneur. So in the year that I came in, I actually joined a fellowship, Acumen Fellowship, that plugged me into a network or a cohort of just game-changing people who are just looking to make positive change in our market. So for me, that was also an eye-opener in terms of coming into a country, but just plugging myself in with people who are doing just incredible things. I want to just also echo that, you need to set your pace here when you come, right? And when you come in, you're older, your values have changed. So you try and fit into the old crowd, but it might not work out. Your values, the way you did things in the States, not the way people, your ethics, or not the way that things happen here. So, but I find that a lot of people want to fit in with the Joneses, live beyond your means. They're trying to keep up appearances. So when you're coming here and you're looking for friends, just be intentional about who you surround yourself with, people who can help you, like Robert was saying, and not just want to hang out, right? People will come, drink a beer, drink wine, but truly, they're not adding value to your life. So you will find that it's actually a handful of family and friends in terms of people actually you can trust and will have your back through thick and thin.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Faith. So there, be discriminating, be adventurous and be discriminating. We have another question from our panel here, from our audience here. This one's a bit meaty. Those that started their enterprises and non-profits, apart from personal savings, how did you navigate the local funding ecosystem?
So I'll go in and just say, finding local funding, typically, if somebody is investing in you, it's a family member. But tapping into local, and that's my experience, tapping into local funding from corporates or other entities that might have money, until you've done your proof of concept, no one is touching you. So a lot of the funding that is catalytic, that actually goes into accelerators, innovation, and so on, typically is from the US or Europe, where they are sort of like your idea and want to have faith, or sort of are putting faith that you can do it. Over here, you have to have the product and to hand it over for somebody to actually say, Chris Kirubi is going to invest in my this. You know, that's my experience.
Okay, Robert, anything?
I think okay. So anyone tells you that your first investors are the 3 Fs: fools, friends, and family. I think the biggest thing about Kenya is it was it Faith who said that don't come thinking that was it Lynn who said don't come thinking that you're bringing anything new. Your biggest bet here, which is what happened to me, was having to understand the landscape. I came and I was a big shot. I mean, when I left the States, I was at $100 an hour. I came to Kenya and I was like this big shot software engineer, and I got cut at my feet very quick, right? so it's taken me, like, I came back, I got cut down, I was broken for a little bit, and then I rose back up and I was like, no, I gotta understand this. And a lot of stuff is just understanding the landscape. So if you're coming with an idea and you think you're gonna land and just get the cash, it's not gonna happen. Oh, hey, let me not be the Debbie Downer. It could happen, but I think you should be more realistic in like coming with the way I did. Come with your package, your thing, the way Faith did. Come employed with a mission and then branch out. Because Faith, you started with Jacaranda and then now you moved into your own. So she came with this package, she made it work. And then by learning the Kenyan landscape, now she's able to replicate the same in her own organization. But it's very hard to land in Kenya and say, I am going to make things happen, because even Jogona down the road is looking at you and he's saying, hey, boss, you forgot to pay the wachichai, and that guy is the guy who opens the gate for the bosses who are coming to, you know, like little things like that you don't even think about. You're just like, wait, why do I need to pay Jogona? He has a salary. Nah, man. Like that. That's the guy who opens the gate, you know. So, yes. So you need to be realistic about that. I think you need to be in the system. You need to get back into the system. Just one thing. My friend told me once when I moved back, he told me, Robert, when you went to the States, you learned how to walk like them. You learned how to talk like them. Now that you're back in Kenya, you need to learn the same. When I landed in Kenya, I couldn't speak Swahili. I was a babi for days. Nowadays, you hear me on the streets and you're like, what the heck is going on? But you have to
learn the language.
Otherwise, yeah, you won't be able to.
Well, Robert, we have a question here for you from Omema King. He mentioned that you realized you were not going to be as successful or as millionaire-ish in America as you wanted. What are some of the major differences in business that you've experienced between Kenya and the States, apart from having to pay Juguna?
Okay, so it's the reason I realized I wouldn't be a millionaire in the States is because I had to be in the system, whereas in Kenya I could play outside the system. Honestly, as far as business goes, when I talk to my friends in New York who had businesses that I didn't even realize because I used to work for them and they used to buffer me, they would give me kind of like the same stories. If you're running an entrepreneurship in the States, you're going to have the same stories as if you're running an entrepreneurship in Kenya. But if you're employed in the States and then you come to Kenya to run an entrepreneurship, you'll be double shocked, because you're one, thinking that it's going to be as easy as the States, and then two, you're now suddenly an entrepreneur. So those are the two things. But my first few years, I used to talk to the guys in the States, and we used to share these stories, and I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't you guys tell me this before I moved back?
Yeah.
So it's really what you want to do now, if you're interested in doing entrepreneurship, is learning about entrepreneurship in the States. And then when you come back to Kenya, you'll have a softer landing because you know how to navigate stuff. Now, the cultural things about, Jogona, that one now you learn along the way, but at least you won't be that shocked, because you'll be like, okay, fine. And this has to happen for this. Things are named differently. Here it's called a bribe, there it's called a kickback, finder's fee, whatever. Set your structures. I have such crazy structures around my kickbacks that nobody can argue with me. They're just like, oh, okay, cool. All right, fine. That's okay. Oh, I hope that's not being recorded.
This is being recorded.
Yes. Finder's fees.
Yeah. Gosh. I even managed to get my ID without giving a bribe. I must be very innocent. I came to start a cartoon studio, and I had to start by training the cartoonists. That's why I'm a university lecturer. I had to, and halfway through, I realized that this 3D thing was just not going to happen. So I had to learn 2D and then start training people in my classes in 2D.
But you see, Mara, that's the thing that I'm talking about. When I started, one of my guys out of Baltimore told me, Robert, the most important thing you have to realize is that if you're going into entrepreneurship, you're actually becoming a teacher, not an employer. And that stuck with me the whole time. And he told me, some of your guys will not even know how to Google. And I'm like, what do you mean not know how to Google? Everyone knows how to Google. He used to sit down with his people and teach them how to Google. Right now, in my company, I'm considered the best Googler because like Googling is a skill. I don't understand it, but it's a skill, and you have to teach people how to Google, and that's part of the journey. And it doesn't matter if you're in the States or here, you're a teacher.
Yes, I would agree. Faith, would you?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
and definitely, Lynn, I would say from the way I've seen you with your team, yes, you have definitely come back as a teacher.
Yeah. I had to teach nurses how to be nurses. So the nursing practice that I had there and what I saw here, I actually had to teach them, role model, and so on. So I could have had this lovely title, clinical director, chief medical officer. I was on the floor with them, walking with them, teaching them how to even just talk to a patient.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. I'd like to thank all of you. I'd like to thank Original Consulting and Vision Computing for enabling this discussion. And I would like to thank Lynn, Robert, and Faith for your generosity and power in coming back to share your skills and your generosity with us in Kenya. And just spend your working lives here and make the enormous difference that you do just by waking up every morning. Thank you so much. I'd like to tell everybody that the rest of the video from Dr. Vincent Ogutu will be on YouTube, and so will this entire discussion. It will all be on YouTube on the Vision Computing channel from tomorrow morning. Thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Crazy stuff. And that's why I said New York changed me, because it gave me permission. And I saw ordinary people being given permission to do extraordinary stuff. So what about those of us who've been given extra gifts? Why aren't we doing amazing stuff? So if you have all those talents and experience, And hopefully you've got the self-confidence, because I tell people living in the States can either build you or destroy you. It can either make you really, really self-confident, or it can beat you up and you feel you're no good. You don't live an amazing life like other people. It can shatter your self-confidence. It can go either way. I'm just lucky in my case, it panned out the way it did and it empowered me. So if you're empowered, I don't know why you're playing in the little leagues. I've come to think of the US as the little leagues. People would think, oh no, there you're rubbing shoulders with the big guys. And true, when I went there, I was challenged because I wasn't challenged back home. But if you're trying to build something in the US, you have so much of a support system, you have, all these things happening. It's almost easier to do it. But then if you come here, then now you can do something big immediately. You could be the next Google. You could be, whatever, and you've got such a head start with the training and experience that you have. So I don't know why some people wouldn't do it, but I understand, if you've got family and all that there, you've sunk roots. My 6 years doesn't compare to your 20 years, obviously.
Yeah. So generally, the question would would your recommendation be for the diasporans to come back home and start setting up, or should the idea be for the local Kenyans to go outside and be diasporans with the initiative and the thought process of coming back home?
This is probably a crazy developmental theory that I have. If I was given unlimited money, I would make sure every Kenyan spends at least a year abroad and then comes back, just to open their minds, just to show them what's possible. Even something as simple as keeping time. Somebody who doesn't keep time will have to keep time in order not to miss the train. Just as simple as that. It's just that they're so used to the matatu waiting for you, filling up. I have a friend who went to live in Spain, and the first day he wanted to go somewhere, he left the house and they were telling him, where are you going? And he said, I'm going to wait for the bus. And then they say, what's that concept, wait for the bus? He says, yeah, I'm going to wait for the bus. The next bus that comes, I'll hop on. Then they say, why don't you just check the timetable and know the exact time it's coming, and then you go at that time. That was like a mind opener to this guy, because back home, we wait for the bus. No such concept in Europe and the States and Australia and all these other places. So I think it's really a mind opener for people to experience that life abroad. And then also value your roots. So I didn't really value my culture until I went to the States. Then I started seeing people saying, oh, I'm Irish American, and very proudly saying that. Then I say, have you ever been to Ireland? He says, no, not really, but my great-grandfather came from there. But they're like speaking so passionately about it, like they're Irish American, or they're French American, or they're Polish American. And then they ask me, what are you? I say, I'm a Luo from Kenya. It's like, Luo, what's that? Now I start explaining. Then I know so much about it. They're like, whoa, you know that stuff. Yeah, you've lived in a hut. I have. You've, herded cows. Sure. You've, been to bathe in the river. Absolutely. Done that, been that, done that. And suddenly I'm the star because I have roots like they don't. Like I have real roots. It's not like something from a few centuries ago. For me, it's like I know my grandparents. I speak the language. I understand the riddles and the proverbs and it's a different ball game. And so when you go abroad, you appreciate your own culture, and now you come back and you're rooted. So I would totally share